Aloha and welcome to this WOD called Digits Login. And this is the first WOD in the Authentication Authorization module. What we're going to do is we're going to add a login page to the digit system that we've been working on so that only an authenticated user can see contacts or add and modify contacts. So it's pretty simple, the behavior. Basically, whenever you go when you go to the system, regardless of what URL you type in, you're going to always, if you're not authenticated, you're going to always go to a login page. And if you log in with the correct credentials, then you'll go into the system and you'll be able to see the home page and the set of contacts and go to the new contact page. You'll also have your email in the nav bar, and then you'll have a logout link that enables you to log out. Okay? Pretty simple stuff. And what you definitely want to do is go to this system. You want to watch the screencast. You want to download the code and have it available. As you can see, I have it available right here in my Eclipse because it turns out that we're going to make our lives easier by copying a lot of that code to get this behavior. So there's a lot of good boilerplate code in that play example login for this kind of task. Okay, so let's get started. We want to start the timer. We're going to create a branch of our digit system called digits login 1. So I'm going to go here and call it digits 1. So now I'm in this branch, and we'll see here, okay, it says digits 1. So I go to application, and I'll just add some white space there so that I can make a commit to kind of check mark the start of this particular WOD. And so I'm going to implement authorization authentication as illustrated above, and I'm going to start by implementing the credential stuff. So what I'm going to do basically is go down here to the play example login system, go into models, find the user info class, and I'm basically just going to save as into the models package of my system, and I'm going to do the same thing for user info DB, save as into digits app models. And then I also, in the global of this, I have this initialization code. And so I'm going to copy that over into my global. So that's initialized as well. And save that out. And so we should now see that in our models, we have our contact DB. We also have a user info DB. So we've got this back-end ability to deal with users now. Okay, pretty straightforward. Next thing we want to do is get that login page. And in the play example login, it turns out that there's this login form in the Bootstrap 3. So we want to save that into digits in the app views Bootstrap 3. And then there's also this login page, which we want to also save as into digits app views. Okay, so now I think it might be a good idea to try to compile at this point so we can see kind of what needs to be done. Let's see if this is helpful to us. We're running the system, and so if I okay, oh, this is great. So the first thing I noticed is I forgot about my backing class. So in views form data, there's this guy. Let's save him into digits app views form data. Okay. And if we recompile, okay, so this is where it's interesting in that what we notice is that our main template in the login system takes the page name as well as a Boolean representing whether or not the user's logged in and the user info if the person's logged in, because that's going to be displayed in the nav bar. So we need that information in every single page. Okay, so we have some updating to do of the parameters. And we can start by looking at the main.scala from login. You can see that basically it's taking these three parameters. So I'm going to just kind of copy that. And then I'm going to go up to the main scala.html for our digits package. And I'm going to update it to take these three parameters and save that out. Okay, and now what we'll notice is that, for example, the login page is going to always start with that page Boolean user info and then any additional data that that particular page needs. So what we want to do is we want to update, since login is kind of a top-level view, we want to update our index top-level view and our new contact top-level view to also take those three parameters as the first things that are required. So if we look at index.scala.html, what we can do is actually just paste those three parameters in the front. Okay, and then if we look at login, login's got it already. Main is our thing, and then if we look at new contact, it needs them as well. Okay, so having done that, of course, we look at the login when it calls main with those three parameters. So let's make sure that everybody else is calling main with those three parameters as well, which they aren't. So we'll make sure that they do. Index, login does it correctly, new contact, it doesn't do that as, doesn't do that as well. Okay, so now our nav bar is going to get the nav bar, which is contained within the main template, is going to get the three variables that it needs. Our top-level views are going to now have defined those values, and they're expecting to get them from whoever calls them. Well, who calls them? Who calls them is the controller. So now we have to update the controller to make sure that whenever we call these guys, any of these views, we're always passing in the page name, a Boolean indicating whether they're logged in, and the user info if they are logged in. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at. Let's just do it another. We know that things aren't going to compile yet because there's all sorts of things we haven't finished yet. But I thought I'd just call the compiler again. So we're working on the view right now, and so the next thing is update the routes and controller classes necessary. So let's just deal with our routes next. And the easiest way to do that is look at the routes file. And we can see that these are that what we need is we need these two login methods in the routes for digits, which is right here. Okay, and we need the logout method, or the logout route. Okay, so we'll add that one in as well. Okay, so there's routes. We've updated our routes, and now we need, and then of course we need to update our controller. Let's get rid of all this stuff for a second. We want to make sure that our controller contains these methods that we need. Okay, so one of them, so for sure we're going to need the login, the post login, and the logout. So let's just copy those and then go up here to our application.java. Okay, and then we can trying to think what. Well, one problem is that we don't have our authentication class secured.java. So why don't we just copy that over as well? While we're at that's going to go in the controllers class. So here it is, and we'll go save as. And this is why, on the one hand, why it's really nice to have that. That template class, but also because it's also is important that you kind of understand what's going on, because there's a lot of a lot of moving pieces in that particular class. So let's try compiling again, kind of see where we are. And what we find is that there's no logout method in our application. I'm just kind of surprised. I thought I had one in there. Oh, we need to. No, that should be okay. All right. Well, let us continue with application. Oh, I forgot to save the application file, so that's why that was not seeing it. Okay, so now, now we've got we're getting back to the problem that we had before, which is that when we want to render one of these views, we need to be able to pass in the page name, the Boolean indicating whether it's logged in or not, and the user info. And if we go to the application.java here, you can see for the login page, here we pass in, because that's the page that doesn't need authentication, we pass false as the value of the Boolean is logged in, because they're not logged in, because they're at the login page, and null as being the the user info, which we don't have any. Once we've finished a login, we're going to add it to the session, and then we're going to go someplace. Now we're going to want to go, actually, in the case of our system, if we go down to login, okay, when we say post login, we're not going to want to go to profile. We'll want to go to index, right, the home page. And then the home page is now going to be an authenticated class, right? Because we don't want to see the contacts unless they're there, and that means that we're going to want to pass in the user info. Okay, and so if you look at the application, the play example login, you can find these two lines of code, which are very important. This is the way that you get the user info data from the database by looking at the request object and getting the username out of it, as well as the value of the is logged in, which is just to make sure that it was properly retrieved. Okay, so every place that we're going to protect with this authentication annotation, we know that since it's protected this way, that these values will be meaningful within that controller, and we can retrieve them. So what we can do is we can just copy this and go back up to application. And so we see here's an authenticated controller method, and so we can say, well, this is index, that's the page name, and this is the Boolean, and this is the user. Okay? And then new contact, that should also be protected. So we're going to add those two in there. And we're going to put the kind of the guard around it. And now we can render it and say new contact is the page name, is logged in is the Boolean, and user info is the user info. Post contact also needs to be protected. So we'll add the guard to that. Once we have the guard, we can get this information in the following way. Might be a way to kind of refactor this to make it a little more, a little more dry. Don't repeat yourself, but for now, we'll just kind of go with a simple approach. Okay. The login page is not authenticated, and the post login login form data should be login form data. I'll fix that in there. Okay, so that one is all good, and logout is all good. You should actually go to the login page once you log out. Okay, so let's try compiling and see what errors we get at this point. Okay, well, we don't get any errors. That's pretty wonderful. Let's see if we can refresh. Okay. Now, here's an interesting thing. You can see that actually, well, let's see what it says. Oh, I know what it is. Okay, so it turns out in our test code, we're going to get to testing real soon now. I apologize that I've gone so far in the semester without talking about testing, and we're really going to get to it by the end of the semester. Probably when I teach it again, I'm going to get to it a little earlier. What we can see here is that we need to add some parameters to that particular call. And here's something funny that happens that I don't quite understand, which is that even though there's no errors indicated here, we have this one remaining. And in fact, in Eclipse, which I'm getting increasingly frustrated by, you can see that refreshing it doesn't make it go away. Now, what I have found, let's see if it works this time. If I close the project and open the project, it seems to get rid of that problem. Let's just see if it did it this time. Yeah, so now it's gone. So that's another thing you can try to clean up Eclipse, get it to understand what's going on. I really apologize. I'm thinking next time I'm going to pick something else. But anyway, it should be generally pretty simple to get things to be fairly clean in Eclipse, and we've got our system almost working now. 17 minutes later, we can. The problem now actually is just that our menu is not correct. Okay, and we can kind of let's see if we do log in using our canonical credentials. Whoops, didn't type it right. Okay, so we do go to the home page, and we see our contacts. And actually, I can even do this. I can manually enter log out, and now that logs us out of the system, and now if I try to go to the home page, I can't get there. Okay, so even if I type return like this, we're getting the right type of protection. Okay, the problem is just that we don't have our menu implemented correctly. So let's start to work on that. And it might be helpful to kind of look at the main from the login system. And basically what happens in here is we have some conditionals. We say if it's logged in, then we show something. And if we're not logged in, we're going to show something else. That's on the left side of the screen, left side of the nav bar. On the right side of the nav bar, again, we have this if it logged in, then show something, otherwise show something else. Well, it turns out in our case that if we're not logged in, we don't want to show anything at all. And it's only if we're logged in that we show stuff. So we can actually have a simpler kind of conditional in our code. And so what I'm going to do is split the screen in two, and then go down to here. And then let's open up the the main view. Of course, it doesn't go in the right spot. Okay. So here's our main for digits in the lower one, and here's the main for Scala HTML up here. So this is what we kind of want to look at as our kind of model. All right. So let's go down to here. And what we can see is that basically this whole thing we want to have in a conditional. Okay, so if logged in, then UL actually, what we can actually do, let's do it this way. Let's say this whole div here, it starts there and ends there. The whole nav bar stuff, actually, we only care about in the event that the user's logged in. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have some stuff on the left side and some stuff on the right side. So we're going to have a UL class nav bar left. Okay, and that's going to have our home and new contacts right there. Okay, that's that div. And then we're going to have another div. Oops. Not that one. And then we're going to have another UL. Okay, which is the nav bar right. And that's going to have our user info. Okay, and our logout link. Okay, so that's basically, so now we've got this whole section. If I've done it correctly, I'm getting these divs to highlight themselves so I can kind of make sure that I'm putting things in correctly. So I've got if I'm logged in, I've got this div. It's a navbar collapse thing, and it's going to have a navbar left with that home and the new contact stuff, and I'm going to have a navbar right. Okay, so I think that looks close enough to try out. So let's do a refresh. Okay, and that's great news. So we got nothing in our menu bar. And just for grins, right, this does work. Okay, so we put in something wrong, but let's put in something right. And click login. Okay, and what do you know? Okay, We're getting everything we want, but now I'm going to show you something that I discovered, and I'm going to be frank with you. This took me about an hour to debug, and that is the fact that Smith at example.com is a couple pixels higher than logout. Okay, and I'm gonna spare you the suspense with this, and I'm just going to tell you it turned out to be the gosh darn bootstrap theme. Okay, and I'll prove it to you, because if I say bootstrap, and instead of Spacelab CSS, so I go back to the default theme, and I refresh, okay, now you can see it's all good. Okay, so it's just this bootstrap, I'm sorry, bootstrap, Spacelab. It's that darn theme. Okay, so how are we going to fix it? And so I'll show you what you can do. What I ended up doing is I inspected this element. Okay, and what I discovered is that in the case of logout, that we have padding top and padding bottom 17 and 13. But in the case of smithexample.com, what we discover is that margin top and margin bottom is 15 and 15. So it should be 17 and 13. For some reason, I think when they made this theme, they neglected to fix the navbar text class. Or, they forgot about it, I guess. And so this doesn't have the right, they changed everything else to be 17, 13 for reasons known only to them, but they kept this at 15, 15. So how do you fix that? Because it's a problem with, this actual theme, really the best thing I can recommend is you gotta do this hack. So you gotta say .navbar text, and then we're gonna override these values to be 17 and 13. Which is, not at all what I would call the elegant solution, but I don't know what else to do. See, now it lines up, and that's the only way I can think of to fix it, because it's basically a bug in the bootstrap. Because if we swap out into regular bootstrap, we don't have this problem. Okay, so there we are, 26 minutes for this URL. So it kind of really depends on what, whether or not you get this problem in your own bootstrap theme is going to depend on what theme you chose. I don't know. The Spacelab one has it. I don't know if other ones have it or not. I hope you don't spend too much time trying to debug that before you look at the solution and see what there is. So anyway, we've got some final things. So we're going to say, okay, finished with WOD. We'll commit and sync. Probably should have checked to make sure that so we finished the WOD. We're going to call it 27 minutes. And I hope that that was informative for you.